Right now, there's an opportunity right now that all the conservatives all of a sudden seem to care about human rights, and they're outraged about this because they didn't care before. So now they care because it's a Democratic administration. But the liberals and the progressives should join in that outrage. So that's why I don't appreciate AOC trying to go out there and do damage control for Biden, to try to say that it isn't the same. No, she should be pissed off at this, and she should be trying to get other people, liberals and progressives, to also be upset. You are listening to The Brown Perspective. So AOC is catching some heat this past week because of comments that she made regarding the situation at the border. It seemed to me like most of the criticism was justified, but I was only watching the reactions from the YouTube commentators or the articles. But then I went and actually saw the whole clip, which is 13 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that a lot of the progressives that I listened to, they were just focusing on a 1 minute segment where she talks about not trying to draw a false equivalence. And then they used that to say that she is defending Joe Biden. So I wanted to get your take on it. So let me go ahead and play this video. This part right here is the part where she's getting criticized. And then I'll also, just to make sure that we are also fair, I'll put part of the video
fair
here.
And balanced.
Yeah, fair and balanced. Here. So I'll play the beginning of the video where, well, let me play this part first. This is where she's being more general, and you can take this as criticism of the Biden administration.
There are arrivals of undocumented children, rather unaccompanied children that have come at the border. And this has led to completely inhumane and unacceptable, horrifying conditions of children in CBP custody. And it's unacceptable and it's horrifying. And I have...
Okay, so just for the sake of time, because I can't play the whole 13 minutes, I'll play this part, and then now let me play the other part where she's drawing heat from. So this is about a minute long.
Now, the first thing I want to say is that the fact that this keeps happening over and over and over again is a political failure by both parties. And I want to be very clear about that, because I don't want to draw false equivalence. What is happening here is not the same as what happened during the Trump administration, where they took babies out of the arms of their mothers and deported their families and permanently traumatized these children, some of whom we don't know will ever be reunified with their family again, which is a level of human rights violation that is just simply not the same. Both of these things are barbaric and they're wrong. But when you rip a baby out of the hands of a mother, you cannot draw the same comparison. And anyone who is trying to do that is doing a profound disservice to the cause of justice.
Okay, so I'll leave it at that.
And what's the problem with what you said?
Well, there's a number of problems here. The first one that I do see, which is a legitimate criticism, is that she's setting the bar so low for drawing that comparison, right? Like in a way, trying to somehow diffuse the anger and the rage a bit, to try to say, tone it down a bit. This isn't the same. But just the fact that just because Trump was separating kids from their parents, and Biden is no longer doing that at the border, that doesn't mean that people shouldn't be outraged based on what's happening. So it's like saying, well, this guy shot you, but the other guy stabbed you, so you shouldn't be upset because you're just getting stabbed, whereas the other guy was trying to shoot you, right? You should be outraged at both situations. So I don't even understand why she, in the first place, wants to compare them in that way, like the lesser of two evils thing. She should just be outraged at both of them. And the other part, which is related to this, is just because the policy has changed slightly under Biden, where now if you have an unaccompanied minor, well, what they're doing is if you show up to the border, they are sending both the parent and the parents and the kids back to Mexico. But if the kid comes unaccompanied, then they're processing the kids through the immigration system. So what this is actually doing now is the asylum seekers that are in Mexico, they're having to make the tough decision to just send the kids by themselves. And this is what they're doing, because now the word has spread that the policy has changed slightly. And I don't know if you have read recently or even before about the conditions in some of these tent camps that have sprung up in Tijuana. I mean, it's terrible. They're outside.
Yeah,
there's no bathrooms.
Which particularly with the winter that they had, and I know that was a
yeah.
particular concern when,
And-
you know, if people were cold in Texas, imagine how folks in Mexico felt.
Yeah, and it's just such a bad situation to be in. And so a lot of these parents are having to do the unthinkable, really, and make that one of the toughest decisions that they have ever made, to send their kid along. Just think about the safety of those kids. I mean, you're out, you're exposed, and Mexico isn't exactly the safest place. Tijuana is not the safest place to be, and there's so many different things that can happen. So where is the outrage about that, right? If she's going to be upset, if she's going to talk about this, then she needs to be consistent. I'm looking for consistency whenever I evaluate these politicians. And to me, she is not lying about it, but she's also omitting it. She chooses not to focus on that. And this is something that it has uniquely been created by the Biden administration, because it's Biden that changed the policy. And whether they knew that this was going to happen or it's an unintended consequence, it doesn't matter. It's still pretty messed up.
Well, I'm trying to understand, and yes, I mean, in some ways, the Biden administration is trying to put together the plane back together after the previous administration dismantled it and did all the things that, you know, like she mentioned, separated families, right, and babies from moms and from fathers and all those things. So I do think that the Biden administration has a difficult job because they're trying to put together the asylum and immigration system. They're also trying to do it and after from a recovering from a pandemic with a lot of immigration proceedings were stopped. So if there was a backlog in immigration court, there's even more of a backlog now. There was also a tremendous attrition of judges, immigration judges. And so there's all these factors that are coming together. And then not only do you have all the people waiting in Mexico, and to your point, you have a lot of people who are coming now, a lot of them being driven by misinformation, done by the coyotes and others who profit from having people give them their life savings in order to do a failed attempt to come to the United States. So I think that, yeah, man, it's complicated.
Yeah, and look, I'll give her credit for at least bringing up the historical context here as well. In this 13-minute video, she does talk about how the underlying problem is that the U.S. has played such a big role in destabilizing a lot of these countries, which has resulted in the conditions that then lead people to want to come to the U.S. seeking asylum. And so fundamentally, you want to fix a problem, you have to start there. And it is difficult. It is a tough situation for the Biden administration because there has been a surge in the number of asylum seekers. But at the same time, Biden could have easily reverted back to the policy under Obama, not to send the parents and the kids back to Mexico. I mean, this is something new that Trump negotiated with the Mexican government. There's no reason why the Biden administration can't undo that. And that's really, okay, so that's one of the worst parts. And the other part is right here you have 500 kids, migrant kids, crammed into plastic pods meant for 32 people. And so this, again, is a result of the influx. So there's so many different things that they could do as well. And it's just a matter of like whether or not they want to do it. And if there was more pressure maybe from our own Latino community on these politicians, maybe we could get something more done. For example, I mean, look at these tent camps in Tijuana. If the policy is to leave the families in Tijuana, put up some money, just some amount of money to provide running water, to provide bathrooms, to provide some type of security so that these families are safe, at least bare minimum. But of course, it's going to become a political issue because, you know, then the conservatives are going to say that we're blowing money that we don't have on immigrants. But this is our asylum system. And if our asylum system now extends to a partnership with Mexico, then the administration has to do something about this, right? Them just saying, well, no, it's not as bad as how Trump was doing it. I mean, that to me just doesn't, you know, I don't really find much comfort in that, especially seeing these pictures and reading the stories of the parents on the Mexican side. There's so much that they could be doing, but they're just not doing it. Have you come across a reason why Biden just doesn't revert to the policy that Obama had?
I think that, well, a couple of things. One is that, I mean, Biden addressed this issue, I think, forcefully and rightfully so in his first press release, his first press conference. So I think he understands the issue, and I think he knows that it's something that he really needs to pay attention to. I think the problem is that, yes, the system is backed up and it's complicated. And to your point, like, yes, now they're getting ready to, and actually I believe it was today that some of his high-level officials were down in Central America to try to not only negotiate with the governments down there, but also try to find the partners where they can, you know, build the houses, build the hospitals, address some of the push factors that are driving these poor refugees and immigrants to come to our shores. So there's that. But I think fundamentally the problem here is that there's a dehumanization, and I think this is what AOC is trying to get at. There's a dehumanization of these migrants, and I think as a society, as a world, we know that you have to treat minors differently. We have whole juvenile law system because we understand that somebody who is a minor is dealing with a lot of different, very, very different circumstances to someone that it's over 18, an adult. So there's the humanization piece, and there's also the criminalization component that I feel that in some ways both the way that they're being handled both here in the U.S. and in Mexico and other parts of Latin America is there's this criminalization of migrants and refugees, and then that creates this negative press, and these images and these things are what conservatives use to say, oh, well, we can't pass immigration reform to deal with the folks who are here without first addressing all of the people who are coming to our borders. And then the other piece is that they don't want to invest. They don't want to invest money and resources to treat the symptoms. They want to make it so like they can actually spend some resources on things that can make a difference, but that's going to take time, right? It's going to take time to address economic opportunity, political corruption, and so many other things that plague a lot of Latin American countries, and that obviously, and to your point earlier, that also have been fomented by the U.S. government, by U.S. companies, etc.
Yeah, these are processes that have been building up for years, and what we're seeing now is the culmination, the result of a lot of different policies result in this. And to try to reverse it, you're right, it does take a long time. It's not an easy problem to solve because so I'm criticizing Biden because At this moment right now, the policy is encouraging for parents to send their kids by themselves. So it's still encouraging separation, just in a different way. But let's just say that Biden did come up with a more generous way of dealing with the migrants. Then the word of mouth would get out there that now it's a little bit easier to go through the asylum process, and then that would probably spark more waves of caravans, which would then probably overflow the facilities again. Maybe that's better, but again, when all you're doing is trying to patch things, you just end up with a different type of problem. And so ultimately, if they do want to solve this issue, and I think you hinted at it, is, I mean, they need to work with the countries in Latin America to do the repairs, to do the infrastructure building, to do the investment, so that the people there can actually have a sense that they have a future there, so that they can stay in their countries. I mean, harder said than done, right? Our own families left Latin America because ultimately it's still a lot better in the U.S. But if you don't tackle that issue, then if all you're doing is dealing with the symptom at the border, you're always going to have problems, and you're just patching. You're just trying to find patches. And this, at least for me, from given my background, I always try to find solutions to problems that work all the time, not just sometimes. And whatever they're gonna come up with right here is just gonna be short term. It's just we're gonna see these problems for the next few years and even into the next administration.
Well, yeah, and that's the problem that you know, and that's the difficult thing with the Biden government, because an administration does one thing and the other one comes and messes that up. And you made the point, right? Like if they would have, it took a while, and let's not forget that Obama received a lot of criticism and was labeled the deporter in chief.
Well, he also built these cages. Remember, let's not forget that.
And in some ways, it's kind of the classic thing that a lot of Democrats have had to prove. It's almost like the same thing that motivated the 1994 crime bill, like just proving that, okay, we Democrats can own the tough on immigration border, or tough at the borders enforcement type of, so we can be more Republicans than the Republicans. And unfortunately that doesn't work, because in some ways the Republicans have messed up the system in a way that, not only have they messed it up, they're not willing to fix it. So now you have at least two bills that are making them their way through Congress, two bills that were passed in their House, one to really help support the Dreamers, which are, almost as American as apple pie and everything that's good with the U.S. And then also farm workers, helping farm workers and giving them the opportunity to provide, to get on the path to citizenship, or at least legal residency. And actually some Republicans did vote for that bill, but now it's going to be in limbo, because I find it hard for 10 Republican senators to jump on getting these bills passed, because they don't want to give the Democrats, quote unquote, the political win, and they just want to obstruct. Meanwhile, all these things happen. There's not enough funding. And it's just very frustrating, because the problem keeps getting worse and worse. And not only is it becomes harder for the immigrants themselves who are suffering, it becomes harder for people here who maybe then get impacted by just some of the negative side effects of having people in your communities, or asylum seekers that come. Like, it just feels like, oh, we're dealing with all of these issues. How come they're getting help and we're struggling? So again, I think let's have hope that some Republican leaders will get back to what they used to do and help come up with solutions that are not only supported by a good number of their voters, but also by business, because they know that they need the workers, they need the talent, they need the consumers here in the U.S. to keep to get the economy back on track, particularly and since we're in recovery mode.
Well, the one thing I'll say in closing is that right now there's an opportunity right now that all the conservatives all of a sudden seem to care about human rights, and they're outraged about this because they didn't care before. So now they care because it's a Democratic administration. But the liberals and the progressives should join in that outrage. So that's why I don't appreciate AOC trying to go out there and do damage control for Biden, to try to say that it isn't the same. No, she should be pissed off at this, and she should be trying to get other people, liberals and progressives, to also be upset, to feel the indignation here, so that collectively everyone could then, we could all, conservatives and liberals, could put pressure on the politicians to do something about this. But if she's trying to tell people, this isn't the same, then people are going to put their guard down and say, yeah, it's no longer that bad because it's not Trump. But right, so then they go to sleep and they stop paying attention and they stop being outraged and they stop screaming and yelling at their politicians to do something about this.
Yeah, I mean, that's a legitimate point, and I think it just highlights the sort of the politics, right? So I think Democrats are concerned. They don't want to, obviously they want to protect the president. They want to protect the vice president, who, by the way, has been charged by the president to attempt to solve this issue. So our prayers and thoughts are with Kamala, and who knows, maybe she's able to prove her international problem solving chops with this issue. And to your point, it's not going to be just on her. It's going to be if she's able to mobilize both the Democratic, liberal, and the conservative wing to come to some sort of agreements and solutions. And you're right. I think part of it is making this. It is an outrageous situation, and I think the more that there's agreement on that, the greater the chances something's going to get done. But at the same time, I think that, as with any other administration, I think Biden has a sense of sequencing, and now they're focused on the COVID-19 response. Now they're focused on the economic recovery, on the infrastructure bill, and you can make an argument that reforming our immigration system will be a huge way to fuel our infrastructure. When you think about the labor force, when you think about workers, when you think about the talent that's going to help the U.S. stay competitive against China and some other global economies. But obviously that's a big ask as people start already thinking about the elections of next year.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Okay.
But we see. I remain hopeful. There's a reason why our parents came here and so many other immigrants, and I know it's frustratingly slow how slow progress can be made on this and so many other issues, but we gotta remain hopeful. And to your point, I think we gotta keep not only holding politicians accountable, holding each other accountable, ourselves accountable, because there are many ways that we are benefiting from the things that are happening in Latin America, or that happened in Latin America, and that we just need to take responsibility and hopefully be part of the solution.
Yep. All right. If you all out there like our content, make sure to check us out. We are Brown Perspective. We're on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Nos vemos.
Ciao.